Hey everyone, and welcome back to NDC. When you're just getting into app development, the hardest question usually isn't how do I code, it's where do I even start? Swift, Kotlin, Flutter, React Native, .NET, maybe even some stuff on the web. Everybody's got an opinion, and most of them have a little bit of conflict. So in this video, I wanted to walk through the actual trade-offs of the major app development languages and frameworks, specifically for new coders. No abstract theory. I just want you to leave here with a short list of, okay, this path suits my needs or kind of fits me. As I talk, I'll show some examples for each ecosystem, real starter projects from the real editors, so you can see what it feels like to work with each one of these stacks. They're all just very basic beginner demos. Let's start off with Swift and Xcode. This is Apple's official path for building on iOS, iPadOS, macOS, watchOS, and tvOS. While you're looking at the B-roll of Xcode right now, I want you to notice something. Swift code is relatively clean. The syntax is modern, readable, and Apple has clearly designed it to be friendly to beginners. The big advantage here is focus. If you know you want to build iPhone and iPad apps, Swift and Xcode is like getting a direct lane into the Apple ecosystem. It's tightly integrated with the system, documentation, and all of Apple's new features. Swift does really well in a few categories. For ease of learning, I give Swift a 10 out of 10. Swift has a clean, readable syntax that many beginners find approachable. Its learning curve is smoother for newbies compared to some other languages. Xcode offers helpful features like SwiftUI's visual design previews that make it easier to build UIs. The main hurdle is needing a Mac. Setting up Xcode on macOS is super straightforward, but not having a Mac adds complexity. There's some workarounds like virtual machines, but you probably would rather just spend the money on the Mac and install Xcode for free. Overall, Swift is considered beginner friendly for a modern programming language. For community support, I'd probably rate it about 8 out of 10. The Swift and iOS developer community is large and active and backed by Apple's extensive documentation, as well as so many great guides and resources from Apple themselves. Definitely check out the developer Apple tutorials. I've even covered a few of these videos on my channel because of how amazing they are and how well structured they are for hitting the ground running to learn Swift and SwiftUI. Also, Apple has an annual WWDC conference and official forums to provide some direct support. While the community may be slightly smaller than the general web or JavaScript world, Swift actually enjoys a robust ecosystem and plenty of learning resources for newcomers. In terms of job market relevance, I'd actually put this one at a 9 out of 10. Demand for iOS developers remains very high in 2025. Many companies release iPhone apps first, or sometimes even exclusively, and thus they're often seeking Swift proficient developers. In developed markets like US and Europe, iOS developers on average earn very competitive salaries, and globally iOS has a smaller user base than Android, but it's so strong in revenue potential, meaning plenty of job opportunities in companies targeting Apple's markets. Overall, learning Swift opens doors to many mobile app developer positions. So the TLDR for Swift, if you want to develop exclusively for iOS, you already have a Mac or planning to have a Mac, I would definitely, as a beginner, start off with Swift and specifically SwiftUI development. Super duper easy to learn. You can even try out the tutorials for completely free and see if it's something that you're interested in. If you're interested in some content creators for Swift and SwiftUI for that Apple development, I'd recommend checking out Code with Chris, super beginner friendly, huge SwiftUI catalog, Sean Allen, a very practical iOS career guidance and some SwiftUI tutorials, Stuart Lynch, who also has some great beginner tutorials and covers some really niche things. You also check out my YouTube channel. I've been doing SwiftUI content for about a year. Or websites, thedeveloper.apple.com is probably your best resource next to Hacking with Swift by Paul Hudson. So definitely check those out. Next up is Kotlin with Android Studio. With Android Studio, there's one major thing to understand. Android projects have more moving parts. There's XML layouts, the Android SDK, app manifests, Gradle, and on top of that, there's learning Kotlin, which is like Java itself. That doesn't necessarily mean hard, but it does mean a bit more to juggle upfront compared to SwiftUI. Kotlin as a language is really nice. It's expressive, type safe, and it fixes a lot of pain points from Java. For ease of learning, I'd probably rank this about 7 of 10. Kotlin itself is designed to be easy to read and write with a cleaner syntax, even compared to Swift's. For beginner, Kotlin is generally straightforward, but it does introduce some advanced features that can take a little bit of extra time to master. If you do have prior programming or Java experience, Kotlin feels natural and reduces any of those weird common errors such as null safety, etc. Complete newcomers might find Android's overall learning curve moderate. You have to grasp the Kotlin language and the Android SDK tools. The good news is that Google does provide many Kotlin first learning materials for Android. So Kotlin is quite beginner friendly, far easier than low level coding languages, but the Android platform specifics do tend to add a lot of complexity. For community support, I would probably rate this same as Swift with 8 out of 10. The Android developer community is actually one of the largest in the world. Kotlin, backed by Google and JetBrains, actually has a rapid growing community and plenty of documentation. You'll have no problem finding tutorials, forums, Stack Overflow articles, and libraries for Android and Kotlin. Since Kotlin is so similar to Java, Kotlin developers also benefit from decades of Java resources and Android examples. So most of the problems you may encounter have solutions in either Kotlin or Java. Google also has official guides, Kotlin-specific Android docs, so that further strengthens that ecosystem. Overall, the community support is excellent. For the job market and relevance, same as Swift, 9 out of 10. Any skilled Android developers are in high demand globally. Android has a massive market share. Kotlin expertise is now a standard requirement for any Android developer roles, though knowing Java is a plus for maintaining any older or legacy apps. So I would say learning Kotlin for Android development is extremely relevant, and it prepares you for a wide range of mobile developer jobs worldwide. If you're looking for content creators for Kotlin and Android, so that Google development, Coding with Mitch has deep Android and Kotlin topics. Philip Lackner has Kotlin, Jetpack Compose, some architecture pattern videos, and Android Developers, the official Google channel, is also a great resource. For websites, developer.android.com is amazing. The Android Jetpack Compose pathway, kotlinlang.org, is the official Kotlin language site, so definitely check out those ones. Now let's talk about Flutter, which uses the Dart language. Flutter, there's a lot of structure, one code base, and a ton of widgets. It's cool because you can drop into hot reload, tweak the UI, and instantly see it redraw. Flutter is a strong choice if you're someone who's looking to create cross-platform. For the ease of learning, I'd probably put this about 7 out of 10. Flutter is actually often praised for being intuitive and easy for beginners compared to some other frameworks. Dart, the language, has a syntax familiar anybody who's used Java, C# or JavaScript experience, and some newcomers even find it reasonably straightforward. Flutter's documentation is pretty clear, and you don't have to deal with platform-specific UI code. Everything is done in Dart with Flutter's widget library. This consistency means once you learn Flutter's approach, you can build for any platform. Beginners can start with simple examples and gradually explore more complex Flutter widgets. One consideration, if you have zero coding experience, you'll be learning both Dart and Flutter's widget tree concept, which is a bit of an initial overhead. Still, most developers report Flutter has a gentle learning curve. For the community support, probably 8 out of 10. Flutter definitely has a huge fast-growing community. In fact, by 2023 to 2025, Flutter edged out React Native, which is the next one we'll be talking about, in popularity among cross-platform developers. It also has about 170k stars on GitHub, which is a lot more than React Native, and an expansive ecosystem of packages. Google's ongoing support, so Flutter updates, Dart improvements, and integration with services like Firebase also bolster Flutter's ecosystem. The community again has a wealth of tutorials, open source libraries. You might want to check out pub.dev for that one, and help on forums. The only reason it's not higher is that Flutter is younger than other web technologies, but at this point, its community size and activity are extremely impressive for a relatively new framework. For the job market relevance, I would probably say about 7 out of 10. Flutter skills are definitely increasingly marketable, and it's continuing to grow as more companies do adopt the framework for its productivity benefits. One code base for multiple platforms. That said, in late 2025, React Native jobs actually still outnumber Flutter jobs in many regions. So off quick research, I looked at US job postings, which showed about 6,400 React Native versus about 1,000 Flutter openings. The gap is closing as Flutter's adaptation grows, but React Native and native technologies have had head starts in the job market. The bright side is many startups, even large apps, are starting to use Flutter, and demand is on the rise. For a new coder, learning Flutter could land you a job, but you might find significantly fewer listings compared to learning native or React Native at this moment. And when I'm saying native, I mean like iOS and Swift SwiftUI development, or Kotlin and Android. Flutter experience is still a valuable skill, 100% for the coming years. Just be aware that as of today, its job market is strong, but not as saturated as some of the other technologies. For content creators for Flutter and Dart, I would definitely check out Flutter, the official Google channel, aflutter.com, which is a great channel, as probably like the largest Flutter specific tutorials on YouTube, I think. I'd also recommend checking out Fireship for some high level, really fast Flutter and coding breakdowns. Just a cool channel. I definitely recommend you check out. For the websites, flutter.dev for those official docs and dart.dev. Now let's shift into React Native, which uses JavaScript and React under the hood. The cool thing is, if you come from web development, there's a lot of familiarities. The components, the props, hooks, that sort of thing. Instead of writing separate native code, you write React components, usually in JavaScript or TypeScript, and React Native bridges them to native UI elements in iOS and Android. This allows for code sharing across platforms while still rendering real native widgets. React Native was first released in 2015 and gained a wide adoption. Let's talk about the ease of learning. I'd probably put it about 7 out of 10. For any person with web development experience, React Native can actually be very approachable. You can leverage existing knowledge on JavaScript and the React library. If you're already comfortable with React for the web, transitioning to React Native is mostly learning some native specific components and APIs. However, if you're an absolute beginner with zero coding background, React Native may feel a little bit more challenging. You'd be learning JavaScript, which has some quirks, and the React paradigm. JavaScript is extremely powerful, but not the simplest language for newcomers. There's a lot of odd parts, which can confuse beginners. Additionally, setting up the React Native environment can be a little bit involved, from Node.js, the Android iOS SDKs, etc. Once you get past that initial hurdle, React Native is actually quite flexible. I'm rating it a bit harder for raw beginners than Flutter or Swift, but if you do have JavaScript, HTML, CSS knowledge, React Native might actually feel more natural. And while you're learning React Native, you're also learning React, a widely used web framework. And I'm going to give community support for React Native a 9 out of 10. It has a huge community and a very mature ecosystem. It's backed by Meta and has been around longer than, say, Flutter. And another reason is there are millions of web developers familiar with React, and much more knowledge and many tools like state management libraries that can be applied to React Native. If you run into an issue, you'll probably find numerous blog posts addressing those issues or bugs. The only minor downside is that some older React Native libraries might become outdated as the framework evolves, but the community usually provides some updated solution. For job market relevance, I'd probably say 8 out of 10. React Native is very relevant in the job market, and many companies, including large ones like Microsoft, Walmart, Coinbase, have used React Native for their mobile apps, creating a steady demand for React Native developers. As of 2025, React Native expertise is actually often highly sought. The appeal for employers is that a React Native hire can potentially work on both mobile platforms and even share code with web projects. For developers, this means that learning React Native gives you access to both mobile app roles and a transferable skill into web development. That being said, React Native does face competition from Flutter and those native approaches. I would say it remains a safe bet given how many legacy and new apps use it. You definitely can't go wrong with learning React Native. Some content creators for React Native, so your JavaScript, TypeScript, React, JavaScript Mastery is a great one, as well as Net Ninja, which has a lot of React and React Native playlists. Programming with Mosh is also really beginner-friendly React and React Native content. You can also check out Expo, the official channel. For websites, reactnative.dev and expo.dev. Next is .NET MAUI, combined with C# and the broader .NET world. This stack is especially interesting if you're already in a Windows or Microsoft heavy environment. For the ease of learning, I would probably say 6 out of 10, if not 5 out of 10. If you're already familiar with C# or .NET development, picking up MAUI is pretty straightforward. You can transfer your knowledge of C# and XAML from WPF, UWP, or Xamarin to mobile apps. For an absolute beginner, however, the learning curve is moderate. C# is powerful. It's object-oriented language with a syntax akin to Java that is fairly beginner-friendly, but it has a lot of depth. You'll need to learn the basics, type memory management, link, etc. Additionally, understanding XAML for the UI layout can be a little bit of a paradigm shift if you haven't seen XML-based UI definitions before. Visual Studio Code is a great environment to work in. Totally love that. And setting up the environment, especially on Windows for any Android and linking to Mac for iOS build, can be a bit involved. On the plus side, the MAUI and its documentation try to simplify things, and you can get a hello world running with their templates really quickly. MAUI might feel a little bit harder for a true beginner compared to like learning Swift, but if you do have some programming background or willingness to dive into C#, it's quite approachable. For community support, probably about 7 out of 10. NetMAUI is relatively new, so its direct community is smaller than Flutter, React Native, Swift, etc. But it is rapidly gaining traction among C# developers. Because MAUI is built on decades of .NET development, you'll actually inherit a large existing community of .NET and C# developers and their resources. You'll also have Microsoft's backing on this one, but kind of just leveraging the general .NET community for help. So not terrible, but not as good as the other ones that we've talked about so far. For job market relevance, maybe 5 out of 10. It's definitely something that's emerging at this point. There's not many listings explicitly for MAUI developers because the technology is new and still kind of being adopted. Enterprises that use Microsoft tech might be gradually moving mobile projects to MAUI, but a lot of mobile roles remain for native, React Native, or even Flutter. But I do want to say, by learning MAUI, it is a niche but growing skill, but you're also demonstrating a strong .NET and C# proficiency, which does have its own robust job market. If you only aim for jobs in Microsoft-centered environments, MAUI can be a great addition. If you're just getting for mobile only, I think all the other coding languages probably edge it out. But do keep an eye on MAUI's growth. It's expected to expand as more developers do adopt it. For .NET, MAUI, that's C# and multi-platform, while the .NET, the official Microsoft channel, has some good deep dives and releases. I'd also recommend James Montemongo. This is a long-time .NET MAUI educator. For websites, learn.microsoft.com/.net/MAUI, MAUI. I know it's kind of pronounced MAWEE, like the island, but MAUI is MAUI, as well as the .NET blog. And finally, I want to talk about progressive web apps, or PWAs. PWAs, you can think of it like web development, so things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If all these native toolings like Xcode, Android Studio, or even .NET with Visual Studio Code can feel heavy or intimidating, PWAs are the most lightweight path into app. Essentially, users can install a PWA through their browser, no app store needed, and this makes PWAs an attractive option for cross-platform development, as one PWA can run on any device with a modern browser, so Android, iOS, desktop, etc. So ease of learning, probably about 8 out of 10. Web development is one of the most accessible ways to start programming. I think the first coding language I ever learned was HTML with CSS. To create a basic web app, you only need a text editor and a browser. You actually don't even need Visual Studio Code, really. There's no specialized IDE or device required, so if any of those tools feel very overwhelming, this is actually a really great place to start. Beginners can find it gratifying that they can write some HTML and JavaScript and see results instantly in a browser. Building a simple app UI with HTML and CSS is easier to grasp for many than setting up native technologies. That said, though, to make a full PWA, you'll need to learn a little bit more. How to register a service worker, how caching works, which are more intermediate web topics. Fortunately, one can start with a regular web app and gradually enhance it. The learning path might involve HTML, CSS basics, then JavaScript programming, and then PWA-specific APIs. But thanks to vast resources for web dev, a determined beginner can reach PWA level skills without too much friction. So yeah, 8 out of 10 because initially entry, those basic web pages, is very easy, but mastering PWA features adds a ton of complexity. In terms of community to support, I'd probably give this one a 10 out of 10. The web development community is massive, essentially the largest pool of developers globally. JavaScript has dominated surveys as the most used programming language, with around 62% of developers using JavaScript in the past year. This means you'll never be short of tutorials, forums, and libraries. For every aspect of building a PWA, from frameworks to issues with browser APIs, there are countless community contributions. Organizations like Google and Mozilla for Firefox actively promote PWAs and provide documentation. Stack Overflow is filled with answers to web dev questions. In short, the support and knowledge base for these are unparalleled. If you choose the PWA route, you effectively tap into all the resources of web, front-end, and mobile communities, hence a full score for community support. And the job relevance, well, I know we were mainly talking about app development, but web development skills are highly in demand, and learning to build PWAs aligns closely with mainstream web developer roles. While a job posting might not specifically say PWA developer, it will ask for front-end or full-stack developers familiar with web frameworks, and possibly PWA techniques. Knowing how to create a web app that works offline is a valuable skill for many web developer positions. And most importantly, the sheer volume of web developer jobs is enormous. Virtually every business needs a web presence, and many are now investing in PWAs to complement or replace native apps. By starting with PWAs, you keep your career options broad. You can apply to classic web/app developer jobs and highlight your ability to deliver across the board and cross-platform solutions. So this approach is definitely relevant in the industry. For a new coder, web/PWA development is one of the most versatile, employment-rich paths you can take. For PWAs, if you're looking for a content creator, I'd recommend checking out Fireship, who I've mentioned before. The Net Ninja is another great one again for web fundamentals, modern JavaScripts, the Coding Addict as well for very solid beginner to intermediate JavaScript content, and for websites, web.dev, which is Google's authoritative PWA documentation. So I think you can really see that each of these languages and frameworks has its strengths. If you want a TLDR in the simplest way to think about it, based on research and my own experience, if you love Apple products and you picture your app on iPhone, iPads, and Macs, start with Swift and Xcode. If you want global reach, especially on a budget device and emerging markets, start with Kotlin and Android. If you want one modern code base across lots of platforms, start with Flutter. If you're drawn to web development and want to span the web and mobile, start with React Native. If your world is Windows, Azure, and enterprise tooling, start with C# and .NET MAUI. If you want to just experiment with your app ideas quickly with no setup, start with PWAs using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. None of these paths are wrong. You can absolutely switch later, skills overlap, concepts like state, networking, navigation, and architecture transfer across all of them. The most important thing is pick one you're excited enough about to stick with through the confusing parts. I personally love Swift and Swift UI. I love working and developing on my Mac. I love Apple devices. I think that the developer tutorials from Apple are unparalleled. It's also cool that through Swift and Xcode, I learn once and I can develop for all of their technologies from Vision OS to Watch and TV, right? So if you're still a little bit lost, here's my challenge for you. Pick one language and one framework from this video and commit to building a tiny project in it this week. Not a big app, not your dream startup, just something that is small, that compiles and run. Maybe a to-do list, a quote generator, or countdown timer. Once you ship and kind of polish that first little thing, you'll have a much better feel for whether that ecosystem fits you or not. Dream big, code bigger, and we'll see you in the next one.